Hi, Alan here from RVAcrossAmerica.net, and I want to take out a few minutes and speak with you. I've got a following of something over 6,000 people on YouTube, and a bit more if you include my website, RVAcrossAmerica.net. And it's largely an RVer crowd, so I would assume that the average age of those following me, in fact, I know from demographics it's 50 plus. We're an active group. We get out there, we do a lot, we love traveling. I belong to a number of Facebook groups where I regularly interact with people and offer insights on getting another RV or getting their current RV fixed. And that's regardless of whether it's a motorhome or a trailer or whatever. Been in the RV industry now for a few years. I've been traveling for 9 years. I expect this summer, if things let up a little bit around here, that I'll be getting over to Cheyenne and I'll be working for an RV dealer over there and going back into store sales, but I'm still going to offer my concierge RV buying and selling business. My purpose of reaching out to you today is to talk about the Chinese coronavirus and its impact on us, RVers. It's having a pretty significant impact, and I just feel that, having a scientific background myself, there are a few things I want to share because there's still some misunderstandings and misconceptions out there. So bear with me, sit back, and listen carefully. Um, when it comes to RVing, I myself am sitting tight here in southeast Idaho. We had another nuisance snowfall last night, another inch or two. I call it a nuisance because all that happens is the sun comes out during the day. What fell melts. It's just getting the ground to be wet and sloppy, and it's slowing down my pace of making preparations to move on. Not that I'm moving on immediately, but I want to be ready if and when I can and if and when I need to. I'm in a pretty good spot right now. I put a post up on RVAcrossAmerica.net the other day showing you in a video, it's probably the previous YouTube video to this, where I am relative to town and what this town is like. It's surrounded on three sides by mountains, and I'm just on the north side of town. I can walk into town, and the restaurants are still open for takeout, and the grocery store is still pretty well stocked. It's got pretty good inventory. So life here is as normal as it can be, and I know there are a lot of places in the country and in the world where it's not normal. So I know the campgrounds in several states are being closed down. I know Oklahoma, I believe, shut down. There are several other states. If you do a search on RV travel and campground shutdowns due to COVID, COVID, or coronavirus, or Chinese virus, whatever, it should lead you to information that will let you know which states are shutting down and what kind of restrictions exist. That's something we all need to be aware of. National parks, most of them are still open. Yellowstone, of course, is not. It would not. It would not normally be at this time of year. Too early for camping in Yellowstone, and who knows what'll happen. The problem in the national parks is that with limited number of attractions, if you will, to visit, they get crowded, and that's not safe. I am a big fan of social distancing as I'm hearing it from the authorities, including the federal authorities. I have a lot of respect for the way the federal government has handled this situation to date. It's a situation that didn't have to be. I do hold the Chinese Communist Red Chinese government accountable for knowing about this as early as mid-December, maybe even earlier, and not telling the rest of the world that there was something going on. So I don't want to get political here, but that's a fact, and there's no way of getting around it. And because of the actions by the Chinese Communist government, it did allow the virus to escape, if you will, to get out. Fortunately, in this country, we shut down flights from China pretty early on at the end of January, and that has reduced the rate at which this thing is spreading across the country. I'm going to share a little bit of data with you. Continuing on RV impacts, some KOAs have shut down, and there's been a 15% reduction in the value of used campers month over month just between January and February. So if you have a used camper and you want to get rid of it, maybe trade it or sell it and replace it with another, first of all, trading it is never a very good option, and right now it's a worse option than ever. Believe me, dealers are fully aware that trade values have gone down, that used vehicle values, used RV values have gone down, and they're going to slam any trade coming in pretty hard. Yes, you could argue that business is probably off at a lot of RV dealers right now, although I understand in Rhode Island it's way up because people are buying campers so they can put them in their backyard so that if somebody gets sick they can quarantine them in the trailer. Kind of an interesting approach. But for areas where that's not happening, I suspect that business in many RV dealerships is slow, and I suspect that dealers are not giving a king's ransom for anything that comes in on trade. As far as what they're selling, they can discount them, but they still have a cost on that trailer, and it's not likely they're going to go below cost. Speaking of which, I have an article coming out very soon, maybe in the next day or two, that'll talk about RV pricing, how much of a discount you should expect under normal circumstances, and what kind of pricing structure exists in the RV industry. So that may help you to understand and plan and make more appropriate choices. If you do have a camper you're trying to sell, you can sell it privately on your own. You're definitely going to get more for it. And if you need my help in that, feel free to reach out to me. Go to rvacrossamerica.net, look for my buying and selling service, and you'll get the information you need there. Okay. Overall, let me say this regarding the virus and the current condition in our country. I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic because of reading about, hearing about, and then hearing the president and Anthony Fauci talk about hydroxychloroquine and Zithromax. The fact that the president is colloquially pushing it, and the fact that Anthony Fauci is scientifically open to it, is a good indication, number one, that it has a reasonable chance of being a successful treatment. Number two, that knowing chloroquine has been around for 70 plus years, and its toxicity to cells is fairly low from my reading. Again, not from personal research. That's good. And of course, Zithromax is a well-known antibiotic and well tolerated by most of the population. Now, some people are still saying, why is there this reaction to the virus when far more people have died from the flu every year than from this virus? I mean, in the United States, we're still under 400 people who have succumbed to the virus. Well, first of all, I want to look at these numbers. And I claim that what the federal government has done, what the state governments have done, I really commend Governor Cuomo and Governor Newsom of New York and California for getting on top of this thing, because that's the only way we're going to keep it in check. And I'll explain what that means in a moment, maybe from a different perspective from what you've heard already from others. According to this morning's data, and this is the 21st of March, there are 53,000 people identified with it in Italy. Now, let me say at the outset, for Italy, for the United States in particular, and for anywhere else, I don't believe those numbers. Because there are people walking around, there are some reports that 1/3 of the people who have it are asymptomatic. I may have it. And if I do, I'm asymptomatic. And what that means is you could be walking around with it and you're not going to go and get a test. The tests are in short supply. And you may have it. And what we know is that people who are asymptomatic are also able to transfer it to somebody else. In other words, we're contagious. Whether it's me or somebody else who's asymptomatic, those people are contagious. And we know that a certain percentage of the population is going to show up with symptoms, and a small percentage of the population is going to get severe symptoms. Now, in Italy, that has resulted in about 5,000 deaths so far. In the United States, with only 30,000 cases identified, but it could easily be well more than the 53,000 in Italy, there have been less than 400 deaths. I think a lot of that is because we've been practicing social distancing and because the governors and the president have been on top of this thing almost from the get-go, really fast for the way government typically responds. In contrast, Spain, with a similar number of cases reported, 28,000 cases compared to the United States, about 30,000. Instead of just under 400 deaths, there have been just under 1,800 deaths. So, assuming that there's no population that's particularly susceptible to this thing, in other words, whether you're an American or whether you're a Spaniard, you're equally likely to get it and get sick from it, it's hard to understand why there have been more than 4 times the deaths in Spain compared to the United States. I have to attribute that to the social distancing and the fact that people are taking this thing seriously. I really hope so. The second thing about this virus is that it attacks the lungs. And if you start feeling chest pressure, if you start feeling shortness of breath, those are things that I would not take lightly and I would not waste time on. There was a report yesterday of a woman who was 39 years old, no underlying conditions, reasonably good health, and reasonably good reaction to having probably the coronavirus. Her result had not even come back yet. And she was found dead in the kitchen. Why? Well, it appears that when this thing attacks the lungs, there are X-ray photos that you can see online of the damage it's doing to the lungs. Now, that's one thing if you die from it. It won't matter after that. But if you survive it, you could go through the rest of your life with severe lung damage. That doesn't sound like a real good prospect to me. That doesn't sound like a lot of fun. Also, the average age. It started out, and of course in Washington State, it hit a nursing home. So of course, the first people that passed away in this country were all 80 plus years old or 70 plus years old. So we got the feeling, and of course the feedback we got from the Chinese data, and don't believe the Chinese data. Notice I didn't even quote Chinese data. I don't believe it, and I don't think you should believe it. But the feeling that we got was that this thing hit older people worse than younger people. I was looking at some information this morning. Some of the GIS data coming out of Florida is very alarming as far as what I can see. Knowing what I know about Broward County and Palm Beach County, which are becoming hotspots along with Dade County in South Florida, and looking up the data that's being published publicly about the average age of people who are being identified with the virus, the average age is in the upper 40s to about 50, and that's in Florida. Colloquially, having lived in West Palm Beach, I thought the average age was about 170 of people living there. Kidding. Don't get offended, Palm Beach people. But knowing that it's an older population base in Palm Beach and Broward County, and then hearing that the average age that's getting sick is in the upper 40s, that's a good indication that there's a lot of younger people who are succumbing to this thing. And that's not a good sign, because younger people are typically healthier. Now, I read a report this morning. A friend of mine who happens to be in his mid-80s sent me, well, wait a minute, no, mid-70s. He'd kill me if I made that mistake. He's from the Boise area. He sent me a report from an immunologist at Johns Hopkins University. And you can email me for that report, by the way. If you email me at rvacrossamerica at gmail.com, I'll be glad to send you the report that was sent to me. It's just an email. It's not an actual written report. It came in the email with his words. I'm sure you can Google it and verify its veracity. But he mentioned that the reason that this is a very big deal is there's no natural immunity to it. If we assume that this came from an animal because of some of the behaviors of the people in Wuhan province who are eating bats and going to open air markets where I'm sure that the sanitation is not particularly good. Hey, I've been to the Fulton Fish Market in New York City. I'm not a great fan of open air markets. And I can only imagine the conditions in an open air market in China. It made the jump from animal to human. That's one thing. It then, within 2 weeks, made the jump from human to human. That's a sign that this thing has morphed or mutated into a modified virus. And now there are two identified strains of it. They call it an S strain and an L strain. I understand one is a little bit worse than the other. So his point is that this thing is going to just go like wildfire through the population unless we do what the authorities are asking us to do. And the American government, I feel, took a great lead with this, with social distancing and beginning to lock things down. And now the other countries in the world are following our lead after us. The key, as I see it, is not to overwhelm the healthcare system. There's only so many ICU beds and there are only so many ventilators. And again, from observing the news conferences that the president and vice president and his team have been running, it's pretty clear to me that they're clearing nearly every red tape hurdle to get ventilators built, along with N95 masks and other protective gear, and to get them into the hands of the practitioners at the hospitals as quickly as possible. Now, that's not going to happen overnight, but it's happening as quickly as possible. And realize that we're in competition with every other country on the planet. I just read in the Jerusalem Post that the Israelis are ordering thousands of ventilators. The only reason I was on the Jerusalem Post this morning is that there's a doctor, an Israeli doctor out of Italy, who is reporting that anybody over 60 is not being admitted if they need ICU or if they need a ventilator. We don't want to get to that point in the United States. Now, that came out of Parma, Italy, so it may not be nationwide. But at least that one doctor in that one hospital in Parma is saying if you're over 60 and if you get the severe form of this virus, you're not going to get treated. Now, we don't want to hear that as Americans within this country. We don't want to get there, which means they've talked about this concept of lowering the curve. What that basically means is slowing down the spread so the number of people at any one moment requiring ICU beds and requiring ventilators is kept to numbers within which we can treat them in this country. You don't want to be the one that's in the position, if you're 50 or 60 plus, that needs a ventilator, and you go to the doctor or you go to the hospital and they say, sorry, we don't have any. And we're only taking people who are age 40 to 59 or 30 to 59, whatever. We don't want to get there, believe me. I have articles coming out on RVAcrossamerica.net, by the way, that are going to talk about, I think I mentioned RV pricing and what discount to expect, or aim for, if you will. I have one coming out on water filters, the good, bad, and the ugly. And thanks to the virus, I got plenty of free time. I did get outside yesterday. You know, I'm in an area where I can take a walk every day. I take about a 30-minute walk every day. There's no restrictions on that. I got outside and I pulled out the generator. I tested the generator because I am a believer that there's going to be some positive results with hydroxychloroquine and with Zithromax. And there was even a question from one reporter. It was kind of blown off by the team up on stage during the presidential news conference 2 or 3 days ago about using chloroquine and Zithromax in advance of having symptoms, in advance of getting into a position where you want to go to the hospital because you've got that chest pressure. That question was not touched by the professionals because it's kind of I get it, it's a third rail to scientists. But if enough people start getting sick in this country, that might be a question worth asking, and that might be an issue worth looking into with your family practitioner or with your preferred doctor or with whatever doctor you're talking to. Anyway, I've gone on long enough. Alan here from RVAcrossamerica.net. I really felt the need to throw my 2 cents in on this. Feel free to like this. Feel free to subscribe. I hope some of the things I've said have not been too politically charged where I end up turning people off. But on that note, if that's what it is, that's what it is. Feel free to visit my site, rvacrossamerica.net. I will continue to keep RVers updated on this emerging situation. And I'm going to make a post, but it's going to be a very brief one, really pointing people right back to this video. So if you got here by YouTube, you don't have to go to my site for this post, but it will be on rvacrossamerica.net/virus. All right. Thank you. Have a great day. And I'd love to hear from you. Feel free to post below in YouTube. Feel free to email me at rvacrossamerica@gmail.com. And that's where I'll be able to get you that report from the immunologist at Johns Hopkins. And feel free to go over to rvacrossamerica.net, and you can always post over there too or contact me there. Hey, thanks. Have a great day.